ULTY helps us earn over $1 million per year in dividends, as you can see below, and we're up 30,000 on Friday, which a lot of that was due to ULTY, okay, ULTY, and we're at 1% on Friday. The Nasdaq was up 0.61 on Friday, so it's important to point that out, that we outperformed the indexes with ULTY. A lot of people have been against ULTY, but now there's an alternative. There's ULTI, and maybe ULTI is the new high yield dividend winner. We're going to go compare the two funds. Okay, I've done my homework, as much homework as I could on ULTY and ULTI, and I hope the chat can also chime in and let me know what they think is the better fund. We're up 33% for the year. Again, we're outperforming all the indexes. The S&P is up 16%. The Nasdaq's up 22%. So we're living financially free out of our brokerage accounts using Yieldmax, ULTY, Cornerstone, and some margin. If you need help doing the same, email me for my e-guides at akintodd48@gmail.com. Here is where you can learn all about my e-guides and the fire movement that we're leading, okay? We have a community of over 3,000 members on Discord, and we're all trying to pursue the FIRE lifestyle, which again means financially independent, retire early. All right, and today we're going to be comparing ULTI to ULTY because ULTY gives us so many of our dividends, and when we get these dividends, they help us pay down our margin debt so fast that it's hard to not grow, even with a sideways market. So you see our margin debt here is 860,000. That's risen because a lot of this is short, and a lot of this is due to the fact that I closed my puts. Okay, when you go here and you see my closed puts here, my sold puts, we've closed some. You can't see, but you remember we had 50% gains, and many of these closed and these sold puts. And we closed them to raise available withdrawal. So yes, my margin debt went up, but my available withdrawal also went up to 543,000. All right, we're at 2 million in our account, but we have 500,000 for withdrawal, over 500,000, which means that we can withstand whatever margin calls, that we're going to come our way. We can withstand whatever margin, issues that we're going to have, because if the market was too volatile, then you're going to see our dividends pay back our margin so fast, the margin isn't really a risk. It's more so about what you hold in your account and what maintenance you have your margin holdings at, okay? So everything is margin, everything is maintenance. But the first thing that I noticed when it came to ULTY, okay, ULTI and ULTY, the first thing that I have to look up as a result is the maintenance, okay? So ULTY has 50% maintenance, as we know. ULTY right here has 50% maintenance, which is pretty good for, such a high volatility fund. And ULTI has 50% maintenance as well, okay? So that was a good start for the fund. Sometimes these maintenance levels can change at your brokerage, especially after a couple of days with E-Trade. So this is something to keep in mind. If this changes to 100% or something like that, then obviously we're not going to be able to make ULTY a big part of our portfolio, and we're going to have to focus on ULTY instead. Okay, ULTY versus ULTI. All right, so again, if ULTI's maintenance goes to 100, we don't want to necessarily be in this. We can't. It's the same issue we had with ULTY, where the ULTY maintenance is at 50%. But if we go below a certain share price, then that changes to 100%. But thankfully, we've been pushing the narrative here at our channel, and other channels are starting to take notice. And now Yieldmax is reconsidering reverse splits again. So we've been dispelling all the myths here at my channel, okay? We've been doing this for 3 years, again, leading the FIRE movement. Other channels are trying to pop up and do what we do, but they can't do what we do because I've been doing this for 20 years, and we have so much information gathered now over the last 3 years of starting our YouTube community. It's really hard to imagine that any other channel could keep up with this, but at least now they're echoing our thoughts, which are, again, you need reverse splits. Reverse splits, this myth that reverse splits hurt your share price, hurt your performance, okay, is a total, amateur thing to say. It really gets on my nerves because people are investing and they're supposed to be serious about their money, and yet they think a split affects an ETF. That's just so misinformed. And so we've been, fighting this narrative for 3 years, going against this, narrative of how splits don't change anything. It's just a cosmetic thing when it comes to ETFs, not stocks. For stocks, that's a different thing. All right, so if ULTI's maintenance stays at 50%, then, this is a good vehicle for us to own because it's not sucking up our equity. If you need help understanding maintenance, that's in my Volume 3 e-guide on how to use margin to live free out of your brokerage account. So ULTI is at 50% maintenance. ULTI is at 50%, but will that continue? All right. We know that ULTI can, again, reverse split and potentially keep us at 50% if the share price drops too low. But ULTI is at 50%, and I've seen many rec shares. I've seen many rec shares funds at 50% maintenance, but something of this magnitude with this kind of volatility, let's again see what happens over the next couple days. All right. I've also been just so glad that, that my community here is dispelling other myths, that there's no erosion in these charts. Go look at a chart of ULTI and you'll see this massive erosion. And it's not really erosion. Everyone thinks, oh my gosh, the share price is falling, I'm losing in my stock. But you go factor back in total returns with ULTI, and you'll see that ULTI is up, around 20 to 30% over the last few months. And then here on the website, you see that it's up 16% since inception. All right, so that's the thing that I just can't understand. When I'm watching, my YouTube community, comment to me about these issues. Well, my community gets it, but many other channels don't seem to understand this, and they're talking about financial information. And I don't give any financial advice. I only share what works with me. But over the years, I've always noticed that a reverse split actually lowered my maintenance, kept the dividend the same, kept everything the same. It just changed the share price. It was purely cosmetic. I don't know why everyone can't understand that, or the fact that erosion on the charts is not a thing. Look at this, 16% since inception with ULTI. All right, the same thing goes for Cornerstone. Everyone thinks that Cornerstone, this is what I started out with on YouTube. Everyone thinks that Cornerstone erodes on its chart, but Cornerstone moves upper, left, or right. And also Cornerstone is how we're keeping our outperformance, okay? We're up 32%. The market's up, half of that. That's because we anchor our Yieldmax positions to things like Cornerstone, which now is, available on Robinhood. So Robinhood, so many investors over the years have been watching my channel who have Robinhood, who can't anchor their holdings to Cornerstone. Now they can. They just need to know how to play Cornerstone. Okay, it's not like you just buy this fund. It's a 20% dividend paying fund, and it drips that dividend down at the NAV for extra money every month. So now we're getting 20% gains on top of the 21% dividend. So Cornerstone sets its dividend at 21%, but it also has these premiums it drips the dividend down at the NAV for 20% gains now. Sometimes we've had 40% plus gains with Cornerstone just every month, just dripping the dividend, and it's low maintenance, Cornerstone. So if you can play Cornerstone properly around the rights offerings, that's how you really capitalize on a fund like this, a closed-end fund. And so, that's what I anchored my portfolio to. You can see Cornerstone was at 1.2% on Friday. Look at the market above. The NASDAQ was only at 0.61. Okay, so S&P at 0.26, Cornerstone blew it away. I've also said in the past video, I don't do many videos on YouTube anymore because the public doesn't appreciate this information. Only my members do, so I've been spending all of my time with members during all this time of heightened volatility in my account. I've just been dealing with my members and my community over at Discord and Circle. Everyone who buys my e-guides, my bundles, gets my number and Discord access for free. So I've just been dealing with all of my members. And, I think that's important because we have a big account to protect. And, all of our accounts have grown, and we want to keep it this way. All right. So, we're staying at around 2.2, staying over the 2 million mark, even with all this volatility, because we didn't have that erosion that we saw like in ULTI. You saw the charts of ULTI, you saw the charts of Misty. A lot of members are in Misty, not my members, but a lot of people are all in on Misty or ULTI. And I love ULTI. It was a big reason for our gains on Friday, but so was Cornerstone. And here we sold Cornerstone right here at these highs, bought right here at the lows, all thanks to the Cornerstone rights offering announcement that we, give you here at Discord. All right. So we knew when to sell. Okay. Here's the announcement. Look at the date. All right. It coincides with this high on Cornerstone. All right. And then we reloaded at the lows. You know how to reload at these lows because it's all in my volume 4 e-guide on how to play Cornerstone. So Cornerstone, I've anchored here. It's 30% maintenance, and it holds up. Look at this chart. I mean, I've told you in past videos this chart was looking bullish, and look at it now. It's starting to, make another leg higher. So, Cornerstone and ULTI both gave me these days gains of being up 30,000 on Friday, or 1.01%, which again just blew away the indexes, as you can see above. And no one would think that something like ULTI and Cornerstone could do this for you, but with ULTI, Cornerstone, and some margin, you're going to grow by whatever the market does times, in my case, about 0.3, 0.3, 0.4, 0.5. You see my margin levels here, 860,000. Okay, so if I had $1 million of margin debt on right now, it would be about 50% margin leverage. All right, and so then whatever the indexes do, if the indexes are at 1%, I'm up, 1.5%. Okay, so that's how I'm getting this outperformance. It's with my margin. And then, none of this shows up on a credit check to bank, so I don't mind keeping this. My interest is so low, I've negotiated my interest rates down twice, so, it's below 5%. Plus, we just had a Fed rate cut again, which lowered our margin rates further. Plus, if we keep this arbitrage opportunity going with high yields and whatever our margin interest is, we're still going to win. But, because I've negotiated my rates down, many of my members have as well. They have the script. You text me, I give you the script whenever you're ready. Again, I'm prioritizing members first and then platinum members. Just, keep that in mind. All right. I'm always overwhelmed because I gave everyone my phone number. My phone number, I'm still giving it out with Discord. I just had to take it away from the lower bundle, the silver bundle. Okay. So if this margin debt isn't showing up on a credit check to banks, if it's low interest, then what's the risk in it other than the leverage itself? But the leverage itself, I already told you, around 300,000 of this is short income. So I'm getting more income that's helping pay down my margin faster. When my margin gets paid down, then my account grows by the equivalent amount. That's how we're getting our growth. It's like acting as a separate bank account that's funding our account. And that's giving us this growth, this outperformance, okay? That and picking the right funds, okay? The right fund mix, which would be Cornerstone and ULTI. But now we have ULTI, okay? And ULTI, here are the holdings for ULTI. First of all, we should, be clear on the holdings here, because look at ULTI. We already showed you the inception. Year to date, it's up 15%, or since inception, it is up 15%. But if you download the holdings here, you'll see that ULTI has a lot of high quality holdings. Yes, these are high volatility. That's what makes the dividend so large for ULTI. But, a lot of these names are high quality. Coinbase, for example, is in the S&P. All right. You have things like, Hims and Lucid are not that high quality. All right. Lulu, somewhat high quality, very volatile. All right. It used to be a high flying stock, but you have MicroStrategy, which is in the indexes, MSTR. You have Palantir, which is in the indexes. And we've seen other high quality holdings within ULTI. They actively manage this. And, we've seen, high quality index plays go in there, leverage index plays, like I always say. We always go with the triple C's. I mean, how else were we up 30,000? I mean, Cornerstone was a part of that. ULTI was another part of that. But the other bulk of my gains come from the triples, okay? And we always talk about the triples. And it's not about buying the triples and the C's, the triple C's, which is volume 7, which is I would say my most viable e-guide that I've ever written. It's not about buying the triples and the C's. It's about when you buy the C's, Cornerstone, playing it around the rights offering. And it's about when you buy the triples, and not only when you buy the triples, you obviously buy them low. Everyone knows that. It's about how you deleverage out of problematic areas in your account. And then you go into these leverage areas and you bounce back even harder without the risk, even at the highs, even with all the volatility. That's how we kept this outperformance. It's how I've been maneuvering between the triples and Roundhill, Rec Shares, Defiance, et cetera, et cetera. It's how I've been using the two off of each other, and it's kind of a complicated thing to explain here on the video, but yeah, that's all in volume 7. And so, the key is to getting these gains. It was ULTI, it was Cornerstone, and it was the triples. And ULTI holds the triples in many situations. Okay. Again, we didn't see them in the holdings this time, but they are actively managed. Also, ULTI, buys puts. It buys puts with the call, so it protects each of the positions. With ULTI, all right, this new fund on the block, which is trying to compete with ULTI, and it's really hard to to beat ULTI in my opinion, because I have so much loyalty to Yieldmax. I mean, yes, you've seen that we've, they invited many YouTubers to New York, and I had a good time with management there. And it's not just they wined and dined us. Okay, that was nothing. It wasn't even that. This was a great opportunity for us to go do the closing bell, and that's what I was grateful for, and just them considering me. But it's their products that I have loyalty for them for. All right, and they also have a great management. Every time I need to talk to them, they always get back to me. I would say names, but I don't like to get into any specifics, or I don't know what guidelines are or anything. So anyway, I just want to say that their management is always very transparent and always available. But that's not why I like them. I like them because their products work for me, and they help give me this outperformance, and they work for all of my members. All right, and will ULTI be the same way? Do they have the same management? I mean, yes. Rec Shares have reached out to me. They've given me some nice gestures, I would say, but nothing like what Yieldmax has done. And that's not important. I don't get compensated from anybody. It's just that I'm looking at their overall care for trying to get messages out to the public. All right, Yieldmax, they're concerned for just trying to be as transparent as possible, along with their products being as viable as possible. And so it's really hard to beat ULTI once again. All right, shout out to Yieldmax. And ULTI, all right, is this new kid on the block. And let's look at their holdings, because this is really where all of the real information is. Okay, it doesn't really matter what they do. They say they have an actively managed approach, right? We've heard this same song and dance. You could read this here: sophisticated strategy targeting the market's most volatile U.S. stocks, similar to ULTI, right? They implement and manage a mix of put and call positions. All right, ULTI seeks to turn volatility into weekly income with downside mitigation against extreme market swings. So we were talking about that on Spaces this last Wednesday. Yieldmax and I and whoever else was invited. We were talking about the reverse splits, which is important. Again, I'm glad more people are starting to take notice of the reverse splits. The issue with maintenance there. But we're also talking about insurance and how that's been affecting performance, the puts that these funds buy. And will they ever monetize these puts? And, Yieldmax said that they had big gains, just like we had big gains in some of our puts. All right, members know that, during this last week, one of our Misty puts was up 500%. I was sharing on Circle. A lot of our other puts were up big. Our hedges, our inverse hedges were up big. We talk all about hedges and puts in volume 5. All of them were up big. We were protecting our account the whole time. But then we gave back some of those gains, just like Yieldmax gave back some of those gains. And it's nice to know that we're in the same boat there, where they debated taking the profits, but they want crash protection ultimately. And so do I. Okay, I don't really care about making gains on options. They're nice little gains, or on inverse hedges. They're nice, but that's nothing compared to your market value falling from a crash in the stock market, and then yes, those options would become worth a lot more money at that time. But I still don't like to see things fall. I like the downside mitigated, of course. I like to take the steam out of the account. I like to, stop the bleeding, so to speak, on given down days. Because I've lived through real bear markets, 2008. I've lived through 2022, which I don't think a lot of YouTubers here have. I mean, they haven't lived through that situation, nor have they, lived with any type of prolonged correction with Yieldmax and these other kinds of funds. We've dealt with corrections. We dealt with V-bottoms and, V-bottom, those kinds of rallies. But we haven't been able to deal with a prolonged correction with these. I don't think YouTubers or, members who are watching these YouTube channels have any idea, what kind of world of hurt they're in for if they don't manage their volatility and use these puts for extreme crash protection. All right, and thankfully ULTI and ULTI do that for you. But the glaring difference for me between ULTI and ULTI is that look at the holdings for ULTI. Okay, we have Lemonade, we have Marathon, Upstart, Sunrun, Solar Desk, whatever these holdings are. Okay, Core Scientific. These are not major index players. and they're not balanced out with a lot of other quality names. I was just looking at the names. Once again, they're high volatility, no doubt about that. You're going to get a high yield, potentially a higher yield than with ULTI, just because look at the volatility in some of these names, and they're not balanced out with, you know, other high quality names like, you know, again, a Bloom or a Lemonade. These are extreme volatility. Okay, I've sold puts for my dad for Bloom to lower his margin. And Bloom just had a huge run recently. I sold Bloom for the gain. My members know that. I didn't have much in it. But then I sold puts in my dad's account because he's big into, you know, energy. You know, that was his former profession. And, you know, he did really well on his sold puts for Bloom because the volatility was so high. He already got a lot of premium, lowered his margin. That's what he was happy about. He hates seeing that margin debt rise. He doesn't like using as much as me, obviously. So I sold, you know, the put on Bloom for him. If you need help selling put options like I do, that's in my volume 6 e-guide. So look at all the volatility here. This is too much for me, okay? But it is hedged out with puts. You see that, you know, there's a call, there's a put, you know, for each one of these holdings, I've noticed, okay? Someone correct me if I'm wrong. But it's just not a lot of mix of high quality within these holdings. So that was the one glaring difference I saw. The quality of the holdings are not as high for ULTI as they are with ULTI. The second issue that I saw with ULTI is that it says that it utilizes leverage right here, okay? So I don't know if it uses leverage. It says the fund seeks to achieve and maintain exposure to the price utilizing leverage, all right? And I don't believe ULTI utilizes leverage. Someone please correct me if I'm wrong, once again. I claim to be no expert on anything. I give no financial advice. All I like to do is own these vehicles, live in the real world with these vehicles, and then I like to just see how the prices react, and then I adjust my portfolio accordingly, and that's how we keep getting this outperformance, okay? It's because I'm actively managing my own account, selling my own put options, you know, anchoring my account with different kinds of funds. We have all kinds of overlapping indexed approaches within my portfolio that my members are well aware of. You can follow my portfolio anytime here on YouTube under memberships. Try from your cell phone. I hear that works better. Okay. So, you can see my portfolio anytime there once again. And, you know, we're getting this outperformance because we're using everything right. Okay. We're using our margin levels properly. We're staying indexed. We're using these holdings properly, watching our position sizing. We have hedges against ULTI. You know, will ULTI have a hedge? I don't know. We're going to take every day, you know, as it's given to us, and we just react accordingly. All right. And so we just stay on top of it all here at my channel because, you know, I have a real portfolio here, as y'all can see. I show it to the public, and, you know, I make sure to stay as transparent and accountable as I can. That's why I started my YouTube channel. And I want to keep getting my same outperformance, obviously, that I've been getting over the years. And I want my members to have that too. If you need help doing the same, living financially free from 9 to 5, getting this outperformance, email me for my e-guides at akintodd48@gmail.com, or head to my website, unconventionalwealthideas.com, where we're leading the FIRE movement. When you buy my e-guides, you get my number and Discord free for life. Start a GoFundMe where everyone could chip in, possibly rent a conference center at Marriott. And so that would be great, Travel Life. Great idea. I love that, Travel Life. All right. Okay. See y'all next time. Love y'all. Bye.